And we're live. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Laura. I'm Kobo Writing Life's author engagement manager, and co-hosting with me tonight is the lovely Rachel, our promotion specialist. Where is everyone coming from today? Why don't you pop your location in the chat so we can see where everyone's joining in from? And I'll also start by getting everyone who's joining me today, our lovely sci-fi fantasy authors, to tell our listeners a little bit about you and the kind of books that you write. So Sarah, why don't we start with you?
Sure. My name is Sarah Woodbury. I write fantasy more than sci-fi. I have 5 series, all set in medieval Wales, which is different. So they're historical fantasy for sure. Probably my most popular series is the After Kilmedy series. It's now 20 books long, and it's time travel / alternate history where a family time travels back to medieval Wales. So I also have 2 more historical fantasy series that are set what you might call the Dark Ages. One is King Arthur series called the Lion of Wales series, and then another called the Last Pendragon Saga. I also write historical mysteries, but that's not the subject of today's roundtable.
Megan, want to go next?
Sure. I'm Megan. I write epic fantasy, contemporary fantasy, and dystopian YA. I have 2 epic fantasy series that both take place in the same world, and which is super fun to play with. Both of my dystopian series also take place in the same world, but are separate stories. And then I have a couple of different contemporary fantasy series that are very fun to play with. Just getting to work magic into places it doesn't belong is something that I think is very fun. Yeah, I think that's it.
So then I guess it's me. I'm Kylie. I write as Kylie Quillinan, and I mostly write historical fantasy set in ancient Egypt. So my best known series is the Amarna Age, which is set in 18th dynasty Egypt, which is the Tutankhamun era. And that series follows a very fictionalized account of the life of his sister and wife, Ankhesenamun, who is a really, really fascinating woman, and I've wanted to tell her story for a very long time. I do dabble in a few other bits and pieces. I have a Celtic Britain series. I've got some contemporary fantasy, but ancient Egypt is primarily where I focus most of my attention.
Well, I think this is a great segue into our next question, which is touching on one of my favorite aspects as a fan of both sci-fi and fantasy, which is world building, which can include creating a whole new universe where your characters exist, or like Megan, you touched on, incorporating magic where it doesn't necessarily belong. So I would love to know how you all build your fantasy worlds and how you kind of keep track of the worlds you've created. Kylie, can we start with you and your rendition of ancient Egypt?
So I have a bit of a head start with that because I'm writing in a world that really did exist. And it's a really wonderful world for writing fantasy because the Egyptians had so many beliefs in magic and in the way the gods function, and everything they believed about magic just flowed through their everyday lives. So it just gives you so much to play with when you're writing fantasy set in Egypt. For me, I spent a lot of time really trying to get into the head of an ancient Egyptian woman and trying to understand what she knew about things like the way her body functioned, the way the physical world around her functioned. There's so much they didn't know, and that they ascribed magical influences too. So even just things like illness, obviously no concept of anything like germs or infection. That was all, evil spirits or the gods or demons, or you can kind of bring anything you want into that. And there's also, as much as we know a lot about ancient Egypt, there's also a lot we don't know. So that also gives me a lot of freedom to just make things up, which is awesome if you're writing fantasy. So for me, it really is a combination of bringing in what we know about the world and those women and the times they lived in, and then also bringing in a lot of the magical influences. And it is very hard for someone living now not to put my own values on what they would have thought and believed. And I really do try to to keep myself out of that and focus on what the women of those days would have believed. In terms of keeping track of everything, I use Trello, which is a really, really awesome project management tool, and my entire life lives in Trello. So I have boards where I track my books and my characters and my research and just all the random thoughts that you have that you don't want to lose track of. And I spent a lot of time going through that and picking things out and putting them in order, probably more time than I need to. Could probably spend more of that time writing. But that's everything that I need to keep track of for my books goes into Trello.
We love a project management tool, like truly.
Me too.
And Megan, how about you? How do you go about inserting magic into the contemporary world?
So there's 2 different ways that I've tried it. So I have 3 different contemporary fantasy series. I have The Tethering, The Tale of Bryan Adams, and the Fracture Pact series. For The Tethering, it is very much there are magical people who live in secret, but they have the same things as us. They have cell phones, they have cars, they have all that. It's just they are doing these magical things out of sight of us. Obviously to, protect themselves from normal people. With The Tale of Bryan Adams, it's the same sort of secret society thing where you don't want people to know what's going on, but I decided to take a bit more of a tongue-in-cheek attitude towards it. And I love Manhattan. I've lived in New York a couple of times, and I wanted to put it there. And there is so much you can do with the weird things that are actually in New York. So I had a lot of fun, like finding the weird and then finding a reason behind it. So like the mole people, there were actual mole people living below the subway. That's true. And so finding out like, okay, well, why would that be? Or there's a secret book place under the library in New York. There is a trolley that goes down there. It goes under Bryant Park. It's huge. So like getting to use those cool details that you never really think of and working that into the magical world. For Fracture Pact, I went more sort of bring in all the Hollywood elements that you would need for like a heist fantasy. So we still have the hidden society aspect of contemporary fantasy to maintain the world that we know, because otherwise it is not really our world anymore if everyone knows about magic. But getting to pull in more tech aspects because they are pulling off a heist, and getting to pull in more criminal aspects and things like that. So it's exploring different parts of our world and figuring out where it would be cool to stack the magic in.
It's so much fun. I love New York as well. And it is very weird. So finding magical explanations for the city, I love it.
It's really hard not to be like Googling mole people right now, because I have to remember that I'm running a Q&A, so I can't just go off on Wikipedia holes like I'd like to. But that will be for later.
Also write down Rat King. Look up that one for yourself.
Hey, writing it down now.
It's real. I don't know how it's real, but it's real.
I love this so much. And just to kind of round out the world building, Sarah, how do you tackle time travel and also the historical elements of medieval Wales?
Yeah, so what I tend to say about particularly the After Kilmary series is that it's as historically accurate as I can make it, except when it's not. And that's really to say that we do have time travel, and I guess spoiler, it's really an alternate universe. So that's only reached the medieval period that we are essentially time traveling to. And in that, the historical elements of it are the same. I mean, they're not, because we have changed history. The precipitating event is my characters time travel back to medieval Wales to save the life of the last Welsh Prince of Wales, Quillinan and Sarah Woodbury. And with that event, the world changes. Like, it's no longer the conquest of Wales and all this. So I mean, I'm very interested in history and the real history. And when I read about this event that happened, Llywelyn's death, and the English cut off his head and they stuck it on a pike at the Tower of London, I'm like, that needs to be changed. Like that needed to not have happened. So I did, and in doing so, sent my characters and the world onto a different trajectory. So in terms of the magical part of or even maybe the sci-fi part is the world shifting and how it happens. Because of course we can't do it. So the world, they time travel back and forth between what is effectively our world and this alternate universe of the medieval period. So that's the primarily event. So a lot of what I write is based in the real history of people at the time, what we know of it, and then adding in my fictional characters, as well as taking these historical figures and having them take a different trajectory as well, which is super fun and doesn't tie me to the historical timeline in many ways, or in ways that I don't want to be tied to it, I guess. So yeah. As far as world building, I have documents, I guess, of like all my characters and everything like that. I have a website with probably well over 300 articles that I've written over a period of time, which is sort of like my library. If I want to talk about, everything from how people dressed to what illnesses they had to medieval poisons, this kind of thing. It's on my website. Anybody can look at those articles. As well that for the After Kilmeri series in particular, after book 15, in conjunction with my husband, who's a photographer, we created a coffee table book that is, in fact, a world Bible. It's called The Small Corner of Time. And in it is like timelines and all the characters and all the places that we visit, with lots of pictures and maps and this kind of thing that I actually refer to as well. In making it, we created our own world Bible for me, as well as for my audience.
Speaking of series, I know a lot of you have longer series. How do you kind of manage multiple or longer series? Do you have any tips for someone on continuing a series and keeping it going without giving readers fatigue and kind of getting them overwhelmed by the amount of books? Sarah, let's start with you.
Yeah, so the After Kilmeri series is 20 books long. And for my sake, I work very hard to continue to work in variety with it, and so it isn't in fact like the same character. The same characters populate all of the books, but sometimes the storyline goes off in directions that are maybe a little bit unexpected for my readers. But it's something that I always promised, that I wouldn't write a book just to write a book. I'm going to write book 19 in the series just to have book 19. I needed to have a story to tell. And that was always really important. And sometimes that's difficult to get into, especially if you're deep in the weeds of a really long series. At the same time, one of the harder things maybe when at this stage where I have 5 series is to, if I'm going to write a new series, is to come up with an idea that's going to carry me not only through 350 pages, but multiple books. I mean, whatever that initial kernel that you have, that idea that starts you writing chapter 1, needs to be able to something that can be prolonged beyond, just that one book, or that one chapter, and then that one book.
Thanks, Sarah. That's really helpful, because I know you have a lot of lengthy series, so you're kind of the expert on this here. CJ, I'll just give you a chance to kind of introduce yourselves to the listeners, and then maybe after that you can talk a little bit about how you keep your longer series going.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, I'm CJ Archer. I write historical fantasy and historical mystery. Looks like I had some time zone issues. I was given a different time to this one, so I'm glad I'm here. It's 45 minutes earlier than I thought it was. I write my fantasy series. My longest one is 13 books. I find the plot arcs go in waves in a longer series. I never planned to do such longer series. always plan them much shorter, just in case they're not selling very well, and that way I can end it. But I find if, a few books in, if it is doing pretty well, I'll try and keep the plot going. But I never stretch that original plot beyond what it was meant to be. If I do know I'm going to continue with the series beyond that original number of books, I'll try and introduce a new plot, maybe 1 or 2 books before I plan to end it in the first place. And that way, it ends up being like a wave. The first plot arc will finish when it was supposed to, and the second one will have started just before that and continue on. But I do find I'm not someone who can continue a series indefinitely. So I get bored of them. And I think if I get bored of them, then my readers probably will too. So I do end them, definitely.
I kind of have a follow-up question to that. Sorry, Laura, going off book.
No, you're good.
But how do you know when a plot is finished and it's not just like brain fatigue? Like, has it ever happened where you're like, okay, this is done, and then time later, like a new idea pops into your head and you're like, I should have kept going, or vice versa, where you think there's more story to tell and then you kind of hit a wall? I'm not a writer, so I'm always so fascinated by writing processes.
For me, I think it varies. Sometimes you do know it in advance. Like, you might have a plot arc in your back pocket that you could use, that you've discovered maybe in book 2, and you go, if I want to continue this series, I could use that later. Oftentimes, there's a definite ending, there's a definite wall, and you just know it has no more life in you. But there's always the opportunity to spin off a series, so it never quite ends.
I'd like to tag on to that, if I may.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
So in the longer series, because my longest world that I have right now is 9 books long. And what I did going into it, because I, as a reader, get that overwhelm. If there's like too much, I feel like I'm socially behind and the loser. I don't know. It's a weird personal thing. But so what I did was I broke it down into different series within the saga. So they're all complete arcs. So it's a lot like what CJ was talking about, but I separate them so that you don't have to read the one before it, so that it begins a new story. You can skip the other one and move on. And that creates a huge amount of problems where you need lots and lots of beta readers, because you have world knowledge that if your reader came in on the second series, they're not going to have. So you have to find like readers who've never read anything by you and your readers who have been here before, and be really meticulous about it. But if anyone's looking at the option of creating a super long world series where they can get those readers who are diving in and doing 13, 20 books and wanting to binge the whole thing, but like me, feel overwhelmed by having that long a process, having series, and my series in that world, the Elbrea saga, it's Anne of Elbrea and Gelt of Elbrea, they do lock together very much. But I got to finish one series and start a new series, and it's different. So it made it feel a lot more manageable for me. So if anyone else has too long a series anxiety, that may be a good writing option for you to maintain that audience while not overwhelming yourself.
I love that a lot, as somebody who also is easily overwhelmed by both indecision about what to read next and huge series that I'm coming into late on.
Honestly, she mentioned having written 20 books in the same series, and I started sweating. So.
Not all of us can marathon like Sarah Woodbury.
Yeah, well, there's an element where because the first book in 4 of my series is free, and it's always like bringing people into that. Well, in the case of the After Kilmety series, it's Daughter of Time, which is the prequel, and that's always where that's the start. Or they can start at book 1, which is Footsteps in Time. But either way, it's always bringing people in there. And I guess if people are like, oh my gosh, 20 books to read in order to like to get some undefined end, I guess that's a thing. at the same time, I, as a reader, was always like, oh, yay, you know, like if you like it, then you have all of these books to read at your leisure. It's not, you know, it's a different publishing model, where the first book never goes out of print. You're never behind in that regard. There's more. I think I get more, and maybe that's because they drop off because they're like, I can't stand after 10, you know, I'm done. But, you know, more people who come in and are like, oh, I'm on book 5. I can't, you know, I can't wait to keep reading, and knowing that there's so many more makes them happy, instead of being like, oh, that's one more. And then they're emailing you, where's the next one, which I still get, but yeah. So I mean, and I have ended 2 series. I mean, my 2 other fantasy series, The Last Pendragon Saga and The Line of Whales, are done. And then, of course, you get the reverse, which is like, are you going to write more? And, you know, in this series, it's like, no, it's done. It's done. So
I guess that's a much more positive way to look at it. Like, oh, there's so much to read in this world, rather than the immediate overwhelm, which might say something about me. Anyways, moving on. Laura and I would love to kind of talk to each of you about your own little corner of the fantasy world, where you like to write. So Megan, I'm going to start with you. And I have 2 questions for you. One about your writing, one a little bit less. The first is, what drew you to the YA side of fantasy, and why did you decide to kind of pursue that? And then my backup question is, where do you get all of your jokes? Because to those of you who are both here and who are watching, I love bad jokes, and Megan is a legend who includes a bad joke, or a phenomenal joke, I should say, in every promotion submission. So 2 questions.
I love writing in YA because I love how much possibility there is in that age group, and how many firsts. And part of it is practical. My characters don't have a mortgage. They don't have kids they have to get to school. Like, they don't have those things that they have to worry about. They can just focus on saving the world. They don't have bills. But it's also the first love, the first real fight with your parents, the first time you're actually really scared. Because if you think about it, a lot of very lucky teens can get to 16, 17 and not have known like real, true fear, because they're not in these life-threatening situations with wizards coming at them. And so getting to have them experience all of those things for the first time is just very special to me, because I get to enjoy that with my readers. And there's also a certain innocence in it, and not, my YA are not all clean reads like that, though that is not true. Don't think that. But there is a certain innocence to that youth, where even if you're looking at someone who, like in my dystopian series, Heart of Smoke, the female protagonist in it has been through it. Like, there's basically nothing she hasn't seen. But because she is so young, there's still this length of her life with possibility stretching in front of her. So even if it's a potentially very painful and horrible stretch, there is this distance that she has to go in life. And so it's that impetus of like, I have to build a life, even if it's going to be miserable. How do I do this? That it gives an innocence even to tragic, violent places. And I love getting to do that. For the really bad jokes. Some of them, I actually have a friend who I text for jokes, which is great. Anytime you get a cheese joke, it came from my friend. Sometimes if I want a specific theme, so if I'm submitting like my dystopian books that have vampires in them, then I will look up and sort through vampire jokes. Sometimes it takes a while to find good ones though. And so I have a record of them now. If I'm very tired and I just want to see what happens, you can also tell ChatGPT to write you original jokes. And so you can put in the weirdest prompts and it takes a while. Like it'll take like 70 to 100 jokes before it actually comes up with anything remotely funny, but it will eventually come up with some real gems. And I think that's hilarious because I get to read the really bad jokes that make no sense to my husband and we have a great time with it. So I have multiple joke sources depending on the need.
Well, I wholeheartedly appreciate the effort. I can't say the same for my team, who I then repeat every single joke to.
Can confirm.
But thank you very much. You make my day frequently.
I love submitting to Kobo promos, not only because you have a great team and I love the site and I love Kobo readers, because also that means it's joke research day. And so I get to like sit down and pick my set of jokes that I'm going to use for the day. And it makes like doing the book work of being an author a lot more fun.
A part of the author life that you never expected.
It's a great time. I love it.
Kylie, let's talk to you a little bit. You incorporate a lot of mythology in your fantasy series. Have you always been a fan of ancient Egypt? And how does your research process work for your books?
I actually studied ancient Egypt at uni, which was a very, very, very long time ago. I think I initially just took an introduction to New Kingdom Egypt class and I got hooked. So I did quite a lot of courses on ancient Egypt at uni, and then that's just an interest that has continued since then with a lot of reading myself. So now I'm at a point where I don't so much need to research for each book. I know the general world. I know what they eat. I know what the weather was like, how they dressed, all that sort of stuff. It becomes more now about research for a particular time period. So at the moment, I'm writing late 20th dynasty Egypt, which is the reign of Ramses III. So right at the very end of the New Kingdom, if you know your Egyptian history. And this is a little bit outside of my comfort zone. I've tended to stick to 18th dynasty Egypt previously. So this is a couple of 100 years later. It's like a whole new world for me. Egypt is a very different place from what it was earlier in the 18th dynasty. It's kind of at that point where it is for the very final time a major world superpower, and it's all about to go to crap very, very quickly as Ramses III's reign ends. And his own end comes about very dramatically and is fairly unique for an Egyptian pharaoh, which is what drew me to this particular period. So what I've been doing as I write this new series is researching specifically 20th dynasty Egypt, because I don't know a lot about it. And although Egypt was very static for many thousands of years, there's a whole new political situation there that I need to get my head around. And I'm still working on that as I write the series. And I'm sorry, Laura, what was your second question? You've forgotten too, haven't you?
I have. No, I think you answered both of them. It was just about your research and about if you'd always been a fan of Egypt.
Oh, yes. Not until uni. I don't think I really had any concept of ancient Egypt until I did that first class at uni.
Yeah. It's great when your courses are actually interesting at uni.
Yes.
You can actually learn something from them that you enjoy. CJ, let's talk to you a little bit. So you write cozy mysteries as well as your fantasy. Has that kind of changed how you plot your other titles? Do you ever bring aspects of mystery into your fantasy worlds?
Yeah, all my fantasies have a mystery element. But I was writing the fantasies before I was writing the cozy mysteries. So it felt like the cozies were a natural progression on from the historical fantasies. Yeah, so it's just I don't think I could write, even way back when, more than 20 years ago when I was trying historical romance, they always ended up having a mystery in it, whether it was a murder mystery or whether it was some other kind of mystery. I don't think I could write without mystery.
And when it comes to writing your mystery, are you somebody who has to meticulously plot everything out and slip in your red herrings? Or are you able, at this point after writing several mysteries, able to kind of figure it out as you go along?
Yeah, I do like to start with a lot of the plot known. And I'll just write a list of plot points before I start but it changes. And I think the further I go into my career and the more experience I get, the more comfortable I am with changing plots. You know, I've changed the villain halfway through, just because you realize that it's not going to work the way it was plotted out. I think you just got to. I trust my own process now, and I trust my instincts a lot better than I used to. So yeah, it's my plots are fairly fluid.
That's really cool. I'm always fascinated by the mystery mind. Sarah, gonna jump over to you, and I'm so curious because medieval Wales seems so specific for a time period, and I'm just so curious what drew you to that time period.
Honestly, it was. So I went to my junior year abroad in England, and visited Wales for the first time there, and just honestly fell in love with sort of the whole thing. I mean, it's Celtic, it's not English, it's a different language. And my dad then said that we had Welsh ancestry, which for a whole number of years might have been my husband and I sort of thought was fictive, but then I actually did our genealogy, and it's in fact accurate that I have a lot of Welsh as well as Irish and Scottish and so on and so forth. But then, you know, with that I just started reading a lot, and I've always been a reader. You know, I'm sure so many of us have always been readers and really eclectic readers. And my parents were both historians, and so history stuff was always what we did. And I've always been drawn to the medieval period. And all of a sudden, then I started writing my first book, which was actually essentially Lord of the Rings fan fiction, in April of 2006. So 17 plus years ago. And that first book was bad in the way I think a lot of first books were bad and will never see the light of day. But in July, I had a dream where I drove my minivan into medieval Wales and saved Llewellyn's life. And the book, Footsteps in Time, became not about, you know, I wasn't as middle-aged then as I am now, me doing that, but this family of Americans and two teenagers who are now not teenagers anymore. And it sort of, as soon as I had the dream, and then I started writing without like a whole lot of a plot, but like we were going to save his life and then see what happened from there. It was very, very much seat of the pants kind of plot at the time. Been through many incarnations in the years before I got it published, but with that, I immediately realized that this was something that I was passionate about, that like just drew me in a way that you know, I love Lord of the Rings, but it was, you know, had elves and magic stones and who knows about all of that. And the more that I worked with medieval Wales, the more that I enjoyed it. And I have a PhD in anthropology, so like the research stuff was just completely up my alley, and it was a pivot from what I had done my PhD on. But it's really like, let's read more about this time period. And the more I read, the more. Sometimes, I mean, these things that happen, it's like you can't make this stuff up. Like I put author's notes in the back of my book because it's like this really happened, and I've just teed off on it. Because if I were just like making up that plot, it would be like, oh, that's ridiculous. But no, it really happened. So you know, that medieval Wales, and then it's just spiraled out of control for the last, you know, after that. I mean, I spent COVID learning Welsh, so I'm now conversational in Welsh as well. Wow. And it's like, well, okay, we're doing that now. So it's you know, truly a way of life for me at this point.
Your COVID pandemic was much more productive than mine.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing, Rachel. I just made some bread that didn't taste that great. But I'm going to share an audience question before we move on to our next section, Rachel. So if it'll pop up on screen.
It did for a second.
It did for a second. You
And
almost
then
had
it
it.
went.
There we go.
Okay. It's slower for me. Oh, here we go. So Kim is asking, do your characters ever take over or lead you down a different route than you expected and to what you had planned for them? So maybe CJ, will start with you for this one.
Yeah, sometimes they do. I think, well, like when we were talking about plotting mysteries, it's the same sort of thing. Sometimes you do start with a particular character in mind, and they change and surprise you. It's usually quite early on, so it's easy to adapt, but not all the time. But yeah, it definitely happens sometimes. I just go with it.
Megan, you look like you have something to add.
So it's epic. So I wrote book 1 in the Guilds of Elbrea series. That was going to be the series that I was working on. Started writing a side character, fell in love with her, put that book aside, finished book, ready to publish for 3 years, ran off in the other direction and wrote 4 books and a novella about her, then went back. So I took like the longest side path because a character decided they needed a whole series. And so I wrote a whole series because a character led me astray. So, yeah, but I did go back to the Guilds of Elbrea series eventually. But yeah, I went off course a lot.
I love that.
I would say that it happens all the time. Even to the point where sometimes if I'm pantsing a little too much, maybe that's the writer term I use for like not plotting maybe sufficiently for whatever the book, or I do have a plot and now we've gone astray, where I have put all of my characters in a room, literally in the book as I'm writing, around like the dining room table, and had them start talking to each other to solve my plot problem for me as I'm writing it. So yeah. So it's sort of a strange process to say that, but I definitely feel like my characters sometimes take the lead in a way that I don't really intend. And for me, honestly, that's one of the joys of writing is not plotting it out enormously. Like I'll wake up in the morning and I'm sitting down and I'm starting to type, and I'll have an idea of where I'm going, but at the same time, one of the joys is definitely having ideas that just sort of seem to come out of my fingers. And by the end of the 1,000 words that I've written that day, suddenly it's like, wow, that was not where I thought I was going this morning when I got up.
I also have a series that came about because I fell in love with a side character in a bigger series, and it was not someone whose story I was ever planning to write, but I just loved her so much that she ended up getting 3 books of her own. And the series I'm writing at the moment, there's a pair of minor characters that I'm completely in love with as well. So I'm thinking they're probably going to get their own series too. But that works out nicely as well for marketing, because that gives you a companion series to a bigger series. So once people finish the main series, they've got something they can lead off into, and there's already a couple of characters that they're at least a little bit familiar with, even if they don't necessarily know much about them. But in terms of the bigger series, I'm not much of a plotter, but I always have to know where the series is going to end. So in terms of how I get there, I let the characters lead me wherever that goes. So they do largely drive how they get there, but I'm always in control of where they're going to end up when we do finally get to that end point.
Y'all are just setting me up for segues here. It's working so perfectly because Kylie, you mentioned that companion series can work well in marketing, and we want to talk about marketing. So I'm just curious what your marketing plans look like, how you engage with your readers. Do you have newsletters, reader groups, etc.? And Kylie, because you brought up my segue, I'm going to start with you.
Oh, perfect. I do have a newsletter. It goes out once a month. And that's really the only thing I do very consistently for marketing. Marketing is kind of my bugbear. I never really know what to do. I dabble with AMS ads. I dabble with BookBub ads. I don't have a reader group or do anything like that. Mostly I rely on leading readers through from one series to the next. And like I was saying with those companion series. So my best-selling series is 6 novels plus a novella. And then that leads into that side series of 3 books. And then I'm setting the new one up the same. That'll be probably 5 books with a trilogy as a side series. And for me, I feel like that's the best thing I can do right now to put more of my focus on getting the next book out and try not to worry so much about what everybody else is doing with, I've got to do all these ads and I've got to have a reader group and I've got to do this and this and this, because I get very overwhelmed when I look too much at what everybody else is doing and think that I've got to try and keep up with all of that. So I try to really shut that out. I'll spend a little bit on ads every month. Particularly if I've got a new release, I'll usually put a little bit extra money into BookBub ads that month and maybe bump up my AMS ads a bit. But otherwise, they're all very low key. And really, most of my focus goes into just my newsletter once a month and writing the next book.
And CJ, how about for you? Is your marketing consistent across both genres that you write in? Do you, what is the word I'm looking for? Segment your readership at all? What does your marketing plan look like?
No, I find readers will read across genres. I read across genres, so why don't other people? I've never really understood the need to separate my readership. I think you can miss out on a lot of potential readers that way. But no, I have one newsletter. It has some free reader magnets that are closely tied in with a couple of series. So if you have to have read the series to like the reader magnet. So I write in the back of the books, if you want this short story related to this character that you've just read and liked, then join up to my newsletter. So that's really my only marketing. I have first in series free, which most wide authors do. And I use BookBub featured deals for those. I might get 1 a year, sometimes 2 a year. That's pretty much it. I don't do Facebook or BookBub ads or Amazon ads or whatever. I've tried them a few years ago and found I was just throwing money away, so I didn't bother anymore. I'm happy with the way I do. And social media posts, I barely even post once a week anymore. I'll do social media, just a post on my channels when I've got something to announce, pretty much. So yeah, that's about it.
It feels like newsletter is consistent.
Definitely newsletter, absolutely.
Sarah, newsletter, yay, nay?
Yeah.
How's your marketing plan looking?
I think plan is like an overstatement. But it is definitely, I do more ads than CJ does. Mostly AMS ads and Facebook ads. And obviously BookBub when you have a featured deal. The addition to my repertoire basically the last 4 years has been that my husband quit his job to just work with me a number of years ago, and he is a photographer guy, and so we do video. So we have all these trips to Wales that we've done over the last since 2012, and I just enjoy sharing the places that we visit. So we have a YouTube channel, Sarah Woodbury Books, that has something like 200, everything you may or may not want to know about medieval Wales in 3 to 6 minute installments. But it's like the places that we visit or historical notes about, the longbow or, some aspect of the world that my characters interact with. And so that we send out. We do like one a week, and we send that out in a newsletter every week. And so that's been, I guess it's not that new now, about 4 years of that. The channel's it's not like it's big, but it is also another sort of repository for me of we did a video about that. So let's talk about, Carnarvon Castle or something like that. So. That really would probably be one of the bigger. I mean, it's not even marketing because we don't make any money off the channel. It's not monetized at all, but it's just sort of another avenue of being able to reach people and talk about things that are interesting to them. So
Yeah. And it's cool supplementary material for your readers, right?
yeah.
And Megan, other than submitting phenomenal jokes to Kobo promos, what's your marketing strategy?
Okay, so I have a newsletter. It goes out twice a month. Another time if there's like a release or a really big deal going on. I love using I don't leave anything in perma-free. Actually, no, there's one series I completely ignore, and that book's in perma-free. But I rotate through which books I'm having because I have 8 series. So I'll usually do 1 or 2 books a month are free, and then I focus on those things. So I'll get a bunch of newsletter slots on like Robin Reed's Book Barbarian. I'll stack a bunch of those within that free month for coming up in August. It's my book, The Correspondent Thief, is going to be free. So I have a book club featured deal, and then I have 7 different newsletters going on. So that's my free push for that month. And then in October, well, probably mid-September, I'll move on to something else. But I rotate through it so I don't give the newsletters too much fatigue from seeing me all the time. I use actually the different retailers. Kobo has the great, promotions platform, and those are a great tool to reach readers that are really, really hard to find a way to for me. Like, I've never managed to get Facebook ads to work for me that way. I try it. I don't know. I can't. But so having those retailer platform promotions gets you to that audience in such a cool way, along with the newsletters, is really the best way that I found to get to Kobo. And those are great. A lot of them that come up are free even. And then like the ones where it's just you are not expensive at all. So it's great. I also do some AMS ads, some Facebook ads. A lot of what I do is actually short video content on social media. Like I have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and I post pictures on Instagram and Facebook. And I do like my little, this is coming up graphic thing that I'll do for like, this is this month's free book. But it's the short videos that I actually get followers from. And some of them are weird videos that don't specifically relate to my book. I had one go crazy about women running braless in fantasy books. That went huge. Who's to say? Didn't know that was going to happen. But some of those just pick people up, and then they're following my channel. And so they see things about my books. So that's been really helpful to me. And it took me a while to accept that is where I'm comfortable. That like weird, awkward 90-second videos is where I thrive, social media wise. And it seems weird for me to put time into it because I'm an author and like it feels counterintuitive. But the biggest advice I would have for someone who's figuring out how to promote is figuring out what's not going to make you nauseous when you think about having to do it that day. Mm-hmm. So if you're like, AMS ads, Facebook ads, like I cannot look at a spreadsheet right now, it's probably not for you. If you have to talk on camera for 60 seconds and you're like, now I'm having a nervous breakdown, not for you. So just experiment with everyone's advice until you find something that you're like, oh, this is comfortable. I can put myself into this. This isn't going to be a huge chore that I hate. And figure out how to reach your audience through something that you can thrive in. Because if I had to thrive on just creating, picture content that was perfect on Instagram and everything was in the right place, I could not do that. I would drive myself crazy. But weird videos I can do. So just find what works for you.
I think that's a great point because it really will resonate with more people if you're clearly passionate about it and enjoying what you're doing versus something that you're forcing yourself to do. And then you're going to do it more often and then you'll find more readers. So it all works out.
I can't position flowers on books. Like I can't do it. I can't.
That's totally fair. I wanted to talk about box sets for a second. So I know many of you have box sets, and it's one of the things that we always tell authors you should try, especially if you're wide authors and you're on Kobo, because Kobo readers love box sets. So how do you decide where to start a box set, how many books to put into it? what does that process look like for you? Maybe Sarah, we'll start with you for this one.
Okay, so I have box sets of my complete series, which makes sense, as well as like one of them is eight books, and so it's a box set of 3, a box set of 3, a box set of 2. That just evolved because I make stuff up as I go along, particularly, I've been doing it a while. And so initially I didn't have the last 2. So I had a box set and a box set, and then the last 2, and it's don't. So, that just happened. And I think a lot of my box sets just happened that way, sort of deciding how many I'm going to put in a different. So I have 2 of my series have like the first 3 books and a novella, that kind of thing. Even the book that's free, 2 things that are paid for in a novella, and some of that is also just to keep the cost down for readers. And I have, as I said, the complete series. Sometimes I have some that are like in the middle of a series, but it's like I think Megan was talking about, like it's like its own little subset story. So and this is I have 2 series that are medieval mysteries. So for one of them, it's the Godfrey the Dane medieval mysteries, and it's just this 2-book thing because they were both where he was the featured, investigator, and it's like book 11 and 12 or something like that in the main series. So you can buy them all in the main series, but and they're numbered accordingly. But it's this own little thing that is something of a complete little story. So that's kind of, it has been, I have not boxed up like my 20-book series. I don't have 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. I haven't done something like that. I do on Kobo actually have a bundle of maybe like the first 12. And that happened because I'd had 12. I put them all together, 7 years ago or 8 years ago, however long ago that was.
That makes sense. And I love the idea of a full series box set. It's a good way for readers to kind of just binge everything at once. Kylie, do you have any box sets?
I do. I think I've got just about everything that's a completed series in a collection of some sort. Some are in a couple of different collections. I've got a 6-book series that is bundled up as 2 lots of 3, but then I've also got the full series as a separate bundle. I've got some bundles that are exclusive to my website, others that are on the retailers. I'm starting to be a little bit more choosy about which retailers I put my bundles on, though, and obviously for pricing reasons with a certain retailer. I particularly like box sets, though, on Kobo because you have so many great promos with your 40% off or your 30% off collections. So I have as many of them as I can on Kobo, except for a couple that are exclusive to my website. I always wait until 6 months after the last book in the series is out before I do any kind of collection. But usually not long after that last book comes out, I'll get the collection up on pre-order. So those people who have been waiting for a collection so they can just binge through can see that that's coming and they can start to pre-order.
That's a great point, to do kind of the 6-month wait. That's interesting. Megan, do you have any box sets up as well?
Yes, I have. After my series are complete, I always make a complete collection box set. So once it's done, I package it all together. It goes there. I also have 2 other box sets that are just series starter box sets. And I don't tend to focus a lot of marketing on them until I do. So I have one that is 4 series starter novels. They're all contemporary fantasy or dystopian. So they all fit in like that little block of books that I have, not my epic fantasy. And it usually just sits there. I don't usually do anything with it, but every once in a while I'll do a big free push with lots of Facebook ads and newsletters and everything like that. And then I'm handing readers 4 of my books, series starters, for free. So they have the option to choose where they want to start in it, and then they can decide which series they want to go in. And it's been really cool with marketing. I've gotten like 3 BookBub feature deals on it over the years. And so it's this great spike that lasts for months and months and months and months because they'll read the first book in it and then that series. And then they'll read the second book in it and then that series. So yeah, that's the weird thing that I do. The rest of it's just like as soon as I get a complete collection, I wait the 6 months and to let people read through, and then I make my nice little box set and put that up.
A series starter box set is a good idea to kind of give people the option of which series they want to start. That's smart. CJ, what about you?
Yeah, I don't really have any hard and fast rule of when I start a box set. It's generally when sales of that series have slowed down significantly enough that it feels like it needs a boost. But some of my series have the first 3 books and then nothing else in a box set, and some have the whole series in a box set. My biggest box set has a 10-book completed series in it. I only use them really for marketing purposes. So there's not, like the 10-book box set might have $1 discount or whatever, compared to buying them all books separately. I only really use them for the Kobo marketing, the 40% box set discounts and whatever. They're great for that. And also for any BookBub featured deals, if I'm, struggling to get a BookBub on a free first in series, then I'll try with a box set instead of the first 3 books. But I don't use the full complete series box sets on BookBub. I only do the first 3, and that way it'll hopefully they'll go on and to read the rest of the series at full price. But yeah, so I'm not very consistent, and it really depends on how the series is going. I mean, I'm 6 books into my cozy historical mystery series, and I can't see myself making a box set of the first 3 for a while yet. So
thank you for that. That's a good point to kind of keep an eye on how the series is doing and then use the box set to kind of reinvigorate readers. I like that idea. We're running out of time a little bit. So I did want to ask you guys, while I have you all here, why did you choose to go wide with your publications, and why is going wide important for you? Sarah, let's start with you.
So I've been publishing since 2011. So when wide wasn't a thing, actually. I mean, like this contrast, right, didn't exist, and it came into being in December of 2011. And I had spent a lot of 2011 trying to get readership at all retailers, and that's the point that KDP Select, as it was called at the time, came into being, and I was like, by golly, no. And actually at that point, I made Daughter of Time free in the end of December of 2011, and it was such an amazing strategy. Really, sales tripled of all of my books, and all of a sudden I was like, this is the way to go. And so as I wrote more, it's a different strategy. It's a different commitment. It's obviously I do have in all retailers, and to say all retailers worldwide, I think is a lot of readers appreciate that. Of course, if you only are doing Amazon, then there's obviously a niche there. But I really felt from the start that I wanted to do more than that, and reach more people than that, and not honestly have all my eggs in one basket, because there have been times when that's been disastrous. Even if it's only a couple of days, it's a couple of days where you're not selling anything at all. So yeah, it's not been a hard decision, honestly. Various times I've played with putting one series in or out, and really I was always pulling back out and go wide.
Kylie, what about you?
It was a no-brainer for me. I wanted readers all over the world to be able to access my books, and I particularly wanted my books to be in libraries for the readers who can't afford to go and buy each book that they read, and going wide was just the way to do that. So that's not something that I've ever regretted, and I don't ever play around with, should I put one series into KU or anything. I'm 100% wide, and I can't see that changing.
Megan, what about you?
When I first started out, I was very confused by the options. And so I started out with just Amazon because I knew the name and I was like, okay. And then I got about 3 months in and I heard a horror story about someone getting their account shut down, and I went wide, and I have not looked back, because there is that that stability of not having all your eggs in one basket, where if something goes weird with an algorithm or a platform shuts down or whatever happens, there is security in knowing that you have readers lots of places. And so you don't have to panic about your account mysteriously being shut down. Like, I don't have to, that's not a worry on my plate. And I love that for me. So that's why I stay wide.
CJ, what about you? What has that journey been like for you?
Same as Sarah. I've been publishing since January 2011. So KU wasn't even a thing then. And by the time it came in, 50% of my readers were not on Amazon. So it was a no-brainer. Why would I give up 50% for something unknown? And then as the years wore on, and you, like Megan said, you see accounts getting shut down, and yeah, no, thank you. So no, I'm very happy being wide, and I'll always be wide. And yeah, I'm not tempted at all.
We love to hear it.
So as we're wrapping up, can you each just tell readers kind of what you're working on next and where they can find you online? Megan, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Right now I'm working on getting the third book in the Fracture Pact series released. So the first book is The Curse-Bound Thief, which will be free starting soon. So check that out in a while. Because that's my August book. But I'm working on the release for that. I'm also going to the Orlando Reads Books Conference. So if anyone's in the Orlando area, there's a masquerade. So you should come play.
Ooh.
Not every day you get to go to a masquerade. But I am doing that. I'm also preparing another book in the Guilds of Abrea series. And you can find me at meganorussell.com. And that's with 2 S's and 2 L's. I am on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook. Just type in Megan O'Russell. It's O''Russell. And yeah, if you want to check out the weird videos that gets lots of views, even though they're never the ones about my books, they're on TikTok and Instagram. That's where to find them.
Awesome. We'll be sure to check out those weird TikToks. Sarah, what about you?
Right. So I have just put up the pre-order for Legacy of Time, which is the next book in the After Community series. So that's coming out at the end of October. And so I'm sarahwoodbury.com, on YouTube, Sarah Woodbury Books, on Facebook, Sarah Woodbury Books. I actually have a, so I guess private Facebook channel, and the link to that is both on my website, and if you want to join, it's part of a a chat group, 1,000-person strong, but still, it's you can't get to it otherwise. Feel free to join there if you would like. But Sarah Woodbury will get you most everything.
Perfect. Kylie, what about you?
I'm working on a new series called Palace of the Ornaments. An ornament was a very polite word for the women in Pharaoh's harem. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of the setting. This one is set towards the end of the 20th dynasty during the last days of the reign of Ramses III, who is a really interesting character because he's just about the only pharaoh we know of who was assassinated. And the thing that makes that even more interesting is that we have all the court records. So we know who was tried for his assassination and how they all died terribly, horribly. But let's not go into that. So we've got names and occupations of all the people who were accused of being involved in the conspiracy. And what I really love about this period is that it was his own bodyguards and his harem women who were convicted of murdering him. So I am exploring what might have led to these people who are so intimately involved with the pharaoh getting to a position where they decided to kill someone who was considered a living god. So I'm having a lot of fun with that new series. Online, I'm at KylieQuillinan.com. I'm also on Facebook under Kylie Quillinan.
Awesome. That sounds really interesting.
It's a fun time.
CJ, what about you?
Yeah, I'm writing the 5th book in my Glass Library series, which is my historical fantasy series set in 1920. And you can find me online at cjarcher.com. and that has links to all my social medias and things like that as well. So
perfect. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today, and thanks to my lovely authors for joining as well and giving such great advice and tips for everyone listening. We'll be back next month with another live Q&A, which we'll be announcing soon. Bye, everyone.
bye, thanks.